So this particular review is going to cover part of Unit 4, which is Transoceanic Interconnections. Time frame is 1450 to 1750. Now you see right here it does say Part 1. Unit 4 is pretty significant, so we're going to break it up into two parts. Of the 6 themes, we're going to cover 3 of them within this video. So the pie part of pieces. So we'll cover governance, technology and innovation, and then humans and the environment. So again, remember governance, state expansion, formation, decline, maintaining order, and then exercising power. So we have an image here of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. We have the combined kingdoms of Castile and Aragon. With this particular topic, we're looking at the role of states in the expansion of maritime exploration. The simplified version here is that these rulers decided to sponsor the initial voyages of Christopher Columbus. All told, Columbus wasn't asking for much. It wasn't that big of a financial risk for them, and they didn't want the Portuguese to beat them to the punch. So they decided to sponsor the Genovese sailor. Now, when we take a look at 4.4, Maritime Empires established, as it relates to governance, the exact wording here, and we can see Tokugawa Ieyasu. Some Asian states sought to limit the disruptive economic and cultural effects of European-dominated long-distance trade by adopting restrictive or isolationist trade policies. With the Tokugawa, there's, the previous Warring States period, but starting in 1603, Tokugawa Ieyasu began, in a sense, uniting the island of what's now the nation of Japan under his rule. And as time goes on, the Tokugawa explicitly isolate themselves from the outside world. They explicitly cut themselves off from foreign trade, foreign communication, with the exception of letting the Dutch in off of Nagasaki Harbor. So they're all about restricting trade. And then we have new maritime empires, including European states and we can see them all here: Portugal, Spain, the Dutch, France, and the British. So we can see the home countries, and the Dutch are essentially what's now South Africa, laying the stage for kind of the Boer Wars and some of those issues there. We have the Portuguese and their trading post empire, also the Dutch East Indies out here, and Spain, France, and the British. When we take a look at maritime empires being maintained and developed during this time frame, mercantilist policies and practices, all right, they're used by European rulers to expand and control their economies. With mercantilism, you see that economics is a zero-sum game. So you have the treasury of the mother country, balance of trade. Colonies exist to help out the mother country. So you often have exclusive trade deals between the mother country and her colonies. So the colonies exist for the wealth of the mother country. And it also has states competing with each other. So for example, if Spain is getting richer, that means England is getting less rich. All right, so that's mercantilism, leading to joint stock companies. And we also have the notion of economic disputes led to rivalries and conflicts between the states. What we can see here are, this Moroccan invasion. We have Moroccan conflict with the Songhai Empire. So Morocco invaded the lucrative salt mines of the Songhai in the 1580s. The leadership was weak. Eventually, we can see the specific invasion here. Timbuktu was captured in 1591, so eventually the Songhai Empire collapsed. And then when we look at resistance, internal and external challenges to state power, we have Queen Nzinga leader of the Ndongo and Matamba kingdoms. She was in charge for 37 years, and she helped negotiate a deal that opened up trade routes to the Portuguese, but they continued to raid her lands for slaves. So she resisted them. And again, 37 years to be in power. Pretty remarkable. We additionally have slave resistance, and we see an example of what's called a maroon society in Jamaica, where you would often have escaped slaves, Native Americans or indigenous peoples who would escape captivity, in some instances, free white citizens would all be living together. And I like how they have the hills in the background of this image, because often these maroon societies were in isolated, hilled areas, places that were extremely difficult to reach. Next, what we have here is technology and innovation. Remember that humans adapt, we innovate because we want more efficiency, comfort, security, and it's shaped our development with different consequences. For this particular unit, the main example here is innovations from 1450 to 1750. Obviously, that's the time frame of the unit, but we're talking about travel. So in this particular case, knowledge, scientific learning, and technology from the classical, Islamic, and Asian worlds spread, facilitating European technological developments and innovation. Well, innovation. Lateen sail. Note that it's a triangular shaped sail and it allows ships to track against the wind. It's considered extremely reliable because you can use only sail power, all right? You can use wind power. And it is going to eventually allow for increased ship size. Now, with innovations in ship design, that's another historical development of this particular topic. One of the three examples is the caravel. Now, the caravel is primarily going to be used, we see, by the Portuguese and the Spanish. What's helpful about it is it's extremely maneuverable. And this is going to allow the Portuguese to explore both the West African coast, and it's also going to allow for quicker sailing, and you can go into the wind. So a lot of the innovations from this time frame, I mean, yes, they're building upon previous contributions like the lateen sail, but it allows for these longer transoceanic voyages to take place. And then finally, the last portion of this particular unit, we have the theme of humans and the environment, how the two interact with one another. Here's the biggie. The entire topic is called the Columbian Exchange. And even the objective itself, if you look at it, explain the causes of the Columbian Exchange and its effect on the Eastern and Western hemispheres. I mean, this one's so big that there's 5 separate historical developments for one learning objective. All right, so to begin with, we have new connections between the Western and Eastern hemispheres. So North and South America, or it was called the Americas, is going to interact with Afro-Eurasia basically for the first time. And this particular image does a great job of illustrating the different items that are going to be exchanged along these routes. So it's primarily foodstuffs that goes from west to east. And it's really no accident when you look at one of the developments. Populations in Afro-Eurasia benefited nutritionally from the increased diversity of American food crops. So because all of these goods are going to travel from west to east, African populations will benefit. It'll somewhat help offset the losses from the transatlantic slave trade. Not entirely, but it'll at least help. It will get to a point where eventually these goods travel further east to where by the turn of the 20th century, about a quarter of all Chinese crops are, American. They're from the Americas. So we have foodstuffs going from west to east. We also see foodstuffs additional domesticated animals heading from east to west. So we can see all the livestock, cattle, sheep, pigs, horses are going to make a huge splash on the scene. And really, the turkey was kind of the only domesticated animal that traveled from west to east. But also keep in mind that, disease is mentioned in two separate historical developments. Some of these diseases substantially reduce the indigenous populations with catastrophic effects in many areas. The ones that are explicitly mentioned in the development are smallpox, malaria, and then measles. Where Columbus landed in Hispaniola, he encountered the Taino. The Taino don't exist anymore. And that's because of the transfer of these diseases. And also keep in mind with the Columbian Exchange, this takes place over decades, centuries even. It's not as if Columbus made his first voyage and all of this traveled or was transmitted. This is a long, drawn out process that'll have numerous long term effects. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here, we're looking at a plantation. Cash crops were grown primarily on plantations with coerced labor and were exported mostly to Europe and the Middle East. Think tobacco, think sugar, like this sugar plantation here. Items that are grown en masse with coerced labor. Hence why we're going to see different labor systems that are utilized or amped up in this particular unit. All right, so again, this kind of commences part one. We've got the governance, we have technology and innovation, and we have humans and the environment. Part two is going to cover the other three themes. So cultural developments and interactions, economic systems, and social interactions and organization.